Do you know the quadratic formula but can derive it? Alright, let's do that together. So we have a question here and it says, given that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, show that x can be expressed by or written as negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on 2a. Now, this is the quadratic formula and it's one of the most important formulas in algebra. So we are asked, this question requires us to derive that formula, and so we are going to achieve this through the method of completing the squares. Okay, so solution. Now, in solving a quadratic equation through the method of completing the squares, the first thing you do is you make sure the coefficient of x squared is equal to 1. Alright? So the equation here is x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we can clearly see that the coefficient of x squared is not 1. So what do we do to make it 1? We divide the entire equation by a. That is, we divide every term of this equation by a, so that the term in x squared, the a cancels out to make its coefficient 1. Alright? And so dividing all of that by a, we have the result x squared plus b on a x plus c on a equal 0. Now 0 because 0 on a gives 0. Okay? And from there, we can shift or move the constant c on a to the right hand side of the equation. And if we do that, we are going to have x squared plus b on ax equal negative c on a. Now, understand the constant c on a is now negative because it has moved over from the left hand side to above or over the equal sign to the right hand side of the equation. And in algebra, whenever a term moves over the equality sign, its sign changes directly to the opposite. Okay, so now what's next? If we multiply the coefficient of x by a half, that's 1 on 2, the fraction 1 on 2, and then square it and then add it to both sides of this equation, this will give us x squared plus b on a, which is the coefficient of x. So squaring that, so if we have that, we're going to have b on a, b on 2a, sorry, and squaring it and adding it to both sides of the equation. So this is exactly what we are saying. And when we do this, it looks like something like this. Now, expanding this, or when we look at this, we observe that x squared plus b on ax plus b on 2a all that squared becomes a perfect square. Now, when it becomes a perfect square, it means that it can be written as x squared plus b on ax plus b on 2a all that squared can be written as a perfect square. It becomes x plus b on 2a all that square. So this is the perfect square, and we have this equals to, now when we have b on 2a all that squared, taking off the brackets, we have b squared because b multiplies b, and then 2a multiplies itself, and that gives 4a squared minus our constant c on a. Now next, we can solve. So if we focus on the right hand side of the equation, b squared on 4a squared minus c on a. Now the least common multiple between 4a squared and a is going to be 4a squared. So 4a squared divided by 4a squared, that gives us 1 times b squared is b squared, and 4a squared divided by a, that gives us 4a times c, that gives us negative 4ac. So we have the right hand side of the equation becomes b squared minus 4ac on 4a squared. Now remember, this is equal to the perfect square, so we can bring in the perfect square now. X plus b on x plus b on 2a all that squared, that's our perfect square, is equal to b squared minus 4ac on 4a squared. All right, so this now becomes, we introduce the square root on both sides of this equation. The square in the right hand side cancels, and we are going to have x plus b on 2a to be equal to the square root of b squared, the entire square root of b squared minus 4ac on 4a squared. Now this square root sign is distributive over division, okay? So it affects the numerator, which is b squared minus 4ac, and also affects the denominator 4a squared. Now, so bringing in the square root, this gives us x plus b on 2a to be, now this is exactly what I'm saying. So you distribute the square root sign like this from the top and bottom, okay? So it affects, so the square root sign on the numerator is b squared, square root of b squared minus 4ac. And what is the square root of 4a squared? Square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of a squared, the 2 cancels the square root, and we have 2a. And now, so we are saying x plus b on 2a is equal to minus, now this is what the square root, when you're taking a square root of a number, you have two possibilities. So you have, either you have the negative part of that number or the positive part of that number. So we have x plus 2 on plus b on 2a to be equal to the square root of b squared plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. The square root still affects the numerator, and all of that divided by 2a. Now notice the square root can no longer affect the denominator because it already did, and that is why we have 2a left. And if we take the term b on 2a to the right hand side, this gives x equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on 2a. So what that means is we have two values of x. It means x can either be written as negative b plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on 2a, or we write it as x being equal to negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on 2a. So this is how you can derive the quadratic formula. Hope this video was helpful, and if it was helpful to you, make sure you click the share button and share it with your friends so it can also be of help to them. Bye. See you in the next video.